Awesome. I have a bit of a fun topic to talk about. I might show you my socks first,
I was
though.
going to say, show us your socks first. So, if this is your first time joining us, one of the traditions is Matt has probably the most unique sock collection of any. Well, he does of anyone I know, and so he starts off with the shock sock. I can't even say it. Shock sock with sock sharing.
Yeah. So if you were going to say shock therapy, that would be interesting.
No, but it was
Um,
like sock sharing is like a tongue
yes,
twister.
I'll put a little plug out there. I'm on Instagram at the Shoeless Therapist, and I give little tidbits of info on Instagram. So go follow me there if you're interested. And then I always try and show my socks at the end of the video. These socks that I'm about to show you, I actually knew the artist of these socks.
Oh,
Yeah, right. And but I ended up getting into doing some trail running, and I first found out that this artist actually does like design socks and hats, and she does a fantastic job. And so let's see here.
oh,
If you can see,
wow.
yeah. And so she has like these, oh, the background wants to take it.
Yeah.
These
You're,
really cool detailed designs. Now, if I have one critique, it's like the foot though isn't as exciting. And so I always love to show off the feet and but these are really actually nice, comfortable athletic socks, good for hiking and all that stuff. Her
okay,
name
you got to name the artist. Do you know her name off the
Heidi,
top of your?
yeah, Heidi Garner Studio, or I think it's Heidi Garner Studio. You can find her on Instagram as well. I think she's got a website somewhere out there.
I'm gonna look it up while you're talking.
And what's cool is she used to live here. She grew up here, and now she lives in the Sacramento area. And
Oh,
so she's got some really cool, like,
oh,
yeah, she's got some cool stuff. And
yeah.
I actually, my first pair of socks that I got from her, I think I've talked about it on here, but I was actually trail running. There was a lady, I'm trying to remember, she's 60, probably she was 60 years old at the time, if I remember right. And she ran 100 miles in one shot. She did it. It took her 30 hours, I think, if I remember right, just under 30 hours. And I just did one loop. So I did 20 miles with her one night. And it was like the dead of the night. Like I literally started running at like 11 o'clock at night with her. We finished up at like 5 in the morning. And then she had one more 20-mile loop to do by herself. And we sat and talked all night long, just laughing, telling stories. I say talked, we ran,
I was
walked.
gonna say you sat. You didn't
We didn't
sit.
sit. There was no
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
whatsoever. And at the end of it, she had a little goodie bag for me, and like as a thank you for, it's called pacing. I was pacing her in the race, helping, keeping her spirits high, helping her go. And she gave me a pair of these socks. And I was like, oh my gosh, the socks are amazing. And then the artist later kind of found out that I have this whole shoeless thing. And so she sent me like several of her designs for free. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. So she's the closest thing I've had to a sponsor. So.
Yes. Well, I promise I'm going to pay attention to you. I put it in the chat. So Heidi Garner, Garner Studio, for those of you watching this later. And I promise we aren't just going to talk about socks and art, but and there's a whole analogy that I'm sure Matt could go on about, the pacing and the,
Oh,
being there and support. Like, yeah, we
that,
both run and do that type of thing.
oh,
So yeah, yeah.
that was such a cool experience that every year I've gone back and done it with her since then. And
Oh, wow.
she'd asked me if I do it again with her this next year. And I haven't responded. That's a whole nother thing, but I'm probably going to do it with her.
You
And
should.
it's just a neat thing to go out and support somebody to do like that, to run 100 miles. It's incredible. I haven't ever done a 100 miler.
No, I have run a marathon, and I promise we will get to real stuff. And I did it once, and so, but even running the 20 miles, I've done lots of half marathons and stuff, but the 20 miles would be like, I applaud you for doing the 20. So, seriously. So,
No, it's a cool experience. But okay, so let me jump into the topic I want to share today. And I have to be careful because this could sound controversial, and it is not my goal to create controversy, but I do want to introduce an idea that I think is really important to consider. And early in recovery, the dynamic, well, let me start out by saying this. The dynamic that exists in a relationship where there's a partner who is struggling with an addiction is that that partner struggling with an addiction struggles to know how to connect on a peer-to-peer basis, right? They don't know how to do an equal relationship. They're better at being either like the boss or at being told what to do, if that makes sense. And
Yes.
so, and I would argue they don't actually have the skill set, because they've learned growing up either to control other people's emotions or avoid other people's emotions or avoid their own emotions, control their own emotions. So learning how to be in a peer-to-peer relationship where they can have, where they can work with somebody in an emotional relationship is really difficult. What that does inevitably is then you have a partner who, let's say, most likely knows how to do a peer-to-peer relationship, or at least has a much better understanding of it than they do. When they drop into a child role, the partner naturally is like, oh, well, let me take control and let me try and help. And they think like, let me take control and try and help to help bring you back up. But then the person who's struggling with an addiction often resents the fact that they feel controlled when the partner usually is just trying to help manage and bring them back into a peer position. So then they go back up into, oh no, I'm the adult. I'm gonna reclaim my power. Sometimes they reclaim their power by acting out, by lying about their behaviors. And then it leaves the partner going, what in the world is happening? I need to take control again because you're a mess. So you have this dynamic of like power and control happening. And people struggling with addiction will resent the person, the partner who's trying to take control. The partner feels angry and hurt. Like, why can't we just have an equal relationship here? Sometimes the partner's like, whatever I have to do to get us through. It ends up creating, and this is the part that I think is potentially controversial, is that early in recovery, the main focus tends to be safety, stability, and that's because they feel unstable and they feel unsafe. And there's not a whole lot we can do if we don't feel stable and we don't feel safe. But in some recovery circles, it then comes about almost like, you don't owe your partner anything. You need to put your foot down. You need to take control and like make sure they know your boundaries, right? And we've talked a little bit on here how I've struggled with the word boundaries because sometimes it's a front for control. But what ends up sometimes happening, and I would argue many times happening, is that in the partner's quest for safety and stability, they give up intimacy. And by intimacy, I mean emotional intimacy and connection. Now, I want everyone to think about this for a second. The more I seek for safety and stability, the more I sacrifice intimacy. But keep in mind, I'm not going to try and be intimate with, and again, emotionally intimate, or even sexually intimate for that matter. I'm not going to be intimate with somebody who doesn't have the ability to be trustworthy. I'm not going to be intimate with somebody who doesn't, if you will, show that they can handle safety and stability. Right. And so I'm not suggesting for any moment that, hey, give up safety and stability to have intimacy. I'm saying, notice that there's a balance. And I had a mentor of mine recently say, there's a lot of people in trying to reclaim their sexuality, for instance, within a betrayed situation, who want hot sex but aren't willing to give up safety and stability. And this mentor said to me, you can't have hot sex without giving up safety and stability. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to put yourself in a risky situation, or I should say a high risk situation, but the act of being sexual in and of itself is risky. The act of being emotionally intimate is risky. So so I guess I wanted to throw out this idea. Maybe we talk about it, maybe we talk about other things, that at some point in recovery, when we have a decent amount of maybe stability and safety, we have to realize that at some point we may need to sacrifice a little bit of that slowly so that we can actually have a healthy relationship and have hot intimacy. That's a terrible way to put it, but you get what I'm saying? Like, whether it's emotionally or sexually, you're not going to get healthy intimacy without, to some degree, risking that vulnerability. And so the controversial piece is, I wouldn't want anyone to think I'm saying, hey, give it up too soon, give it up when you're not actually ready. But then the other piece is, when are any of us ready? Right? Like, that's the scary piece. When are any of us ready to go? I mean, and that's why usually we do it in pieces. We do it slowly. But ultimately, we do have to risk and get vulnerable. We have to start asking our partner to try and show up for us. We need to let them fail so that they can learn how to be a peer in a relationship. And that's terrifying. So Tammy, what are your thoughts?
I wrote down balance, and I remember, and it took me a while, like years. I'm talking about, the first few years of recovery, because anytime I was kind of in balance was only because I was swinging through on the pendulum, like it was, big emotional upswings, and it was just challenging. Now I live more, centered, and I have more ability to show up, in that way without it being drama on either end. So it's really challenging. You talked about resentment, and I thought, even if, because we get the ragers, you get the people that are, I'm mad at you and you're controlling everything. So, and just work to shut people down. And then you also get the passive aggressive, like, I'm not going to, I'm a conflict avoidant. I'm going to avoid telling you that I'm resentful of you, but I'm going to go act out, that I'm going to go do this, and you're going to find out probably, but that's my control. So having balance in a partnership is ultimately, I shared with everyone, Dr. Stan Tatkin did, we do with a podcast with Dr. Rob, and it talks about, in a real healthy relationship, we are, doing this, and we're never going to be 100% perfect. We are going to disappoint, other people, but we're willing to be vulnerable and connected in a way that's meaningful. And dipping our toes in. I often use, I do this in my personal life, where I go, what's the worst that can happen? And, I can catastrophize. So like it could be really, really bad.
You're an expert at that, huh?
Yeah, well, I can be. I've gotten better at, like, okay, if the absolute worst happens and I name it, will I be okay? Yeah. And what are the odds that that's going to happen? Really, really low. But if it is, like, I've got support, I've got, I will get a plan. It will be, we'll figure it out, And so just having that ability to know that, I've been burned by lots of people, but I'm sure I've burned people, but I'm human. But on some level, it's like, being connected means I am willing to put myself out there, and living in my nice little safe cocoon all by myself would be lonely and disconnected. And basically what addiction was is, that compartmentalized, person, rather than so I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to get hurt. I told a friend today, she had said something, and I heard about it, and And I knew she didn't mean anything by it, but like I had this little resentment, and I had to be willing to say, when you told our mutual friend this, and she goes, I didn't mean, and she
Right.
clarified, and you know what? Takes that away. But it would have been really easy for me to go, you're not safe, and to pull away, and I don't want to do that. So I think it's important to look at this. I was also thinking about the power up, power down. We both know what the Karpman drama triangle is, and being in these positions where you're one up, two down, you're the victim, you're either the power person who's pushing down, or you're the victim. It still isn't a relationship, that isn't the, how do we navigate this so that we are together on this journey, and able to find a way to support each other in a partnership, rather than it being you or or being out of alignment on, and that's work colleagues or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, and it's tough because when I introduced this idea, um, it I've had situations where, let's say I'm working with somebody whose spouse is an active alcoholic. Like, there is a space there where it's like, I hate to say it, like, your main focus should be safety and stability. Because unless you see stability on their part, we're not focusing on intimacy in the relationship, right? Like, and I would say the same thing whether it's sexual compulsivity, right? Your main focus when somebody is active in their addiction is safety and stability. And once you get safe and stable, and then again you start to see some stability, some progress, then maybe you give some vulnerability, right? I would never suggest anybody getting vulnerable with somebody who is actively unstable. But as we do recovery, that should be part of the progress, is that vulnerability. And I realize that's hard to know, but it should be on our minds.
Well, and
Um,
I think it shouldn't be that the partner has to give up all, I mean, like it has to be both of us, and it's a give and take and all of that type of thing. But, and I hear lots, you do too, but where partners are going, I'm gonna stay over here and I'm gonna stay safe, 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 even if he's making progress. I'll use he and she pronouns just for ease, but
right.
or they're going like, well, I know he's trying, so I need to step in. And I was like, he's still acting out, he's still not safe. So finding that is, how do you navigate that gap, is part of the work.
Yeah. It's interesting. I heard it said recently, a word we use a lot in recovery is balance. And I heard somebody recently postulate the idea that balance in life is almost a false statement. And
Mm,
and yeah, let's play with this for a second.
yeah.
But it's like thinking about, like, you've seen people like do the spinning plates trick,
Hmm.
right? And so yeah, they're balancing a plate and they're spinning it, and they're spinning however many of them. And certainly there's some people who can spin more plates than the others. I mean, me personally, I don't know that I know how to spin a plate at all, but like,
I'm with you.
but there's too many people where we think the idea of balance is that every plate is spinning at the exact same rotations per minute as all the others. And balance is really, I'm going to focus on this plate, spin it. Oh, that plate's starting to fall. I'm going to focus on that one. And so the idea of balance is really, where do I need to put my focus in this moment? And then I'm going to switch. Where do I need to put my focus in that moment? Right. And so it's the idea of balance needs to not be that I've got it all figured out. It's that I know where to focus. And maybe I'm now taking tangents, but as I heard you mention balance earlier, I was like, I was really sitting with that idea. And I actually think recovery, it really is like that. Like, right now, my focus needs to be on me growing my support network. And then, you know what? Today I make a few calls and I get some connection. And then tomorrow I'm going to, whatever it might be. But I would argue every day we're going, what are the different plates I need to spin today? But it's hard when you have two people who are doing their recovery work, both of them for different reasons. One person feels betrayed, the other person has out of control behavior. And both of you learning to balance while also having a great relationship is really tough.
But not impossible. We're here to tell
But
you
not
there's hope.
impossible.
Yes,
Yes. Oh yeah.
we're the hopeful team. We, like I
Yes.
mean, I hear people that are, that are changing, but perfectionism is there is no such thing. And anybody who is he betrayed me, he hurt me again, so I'm done. I mean, that level of rigidity, I mean, this is life. We're navigating it, hopefully together, and learning and growing and going, oh, that didn't work so well, so I'm going to try this. Oh, I spun that plate too fast and it went whizzing off to the, or oop, I didn't put enough, whatever it is. But that's a great analogy, because it's not like, where tires on a car where they're all in balance and they're all moving
Yeah.
at the same thing. It's absolutely, yes.
Moving from
And there
one.
are times in life when we do have way more plates than we really can probably handle. So getting support and saying, can you spin this one for me a bit?
Yeah.
That would make sense, So it's really a very good visual. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. So somebody said when we're having our little socks and running, it's nice to hear a little bit about y'all outside of our seeking integrity. So thank you. Thank you for indulging us. Yes, yeah. So.
Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. So feeling sexual while the active is growing and falling is such a trip. Learning to give him and myself grace. We are both doing the best we can, and there will be setbacks, especially in the area of honesty. But we are so crazy, love each other, and want to be together, and still have lots of hot sex. Yeah.
No, and I love that this is in there, because I've had a lot of partners who in fact, let's go on to this subject for a little bit. There's a term that I learned recently that was referred to as the sexual authority. And the idea that in the relationship within like sexual addiction recovery, there's the idea that almost like the person struggling with addiction can't control themselves sexually and they're trying to figure it out. And so the spouse then becomes the sexual authority. You check in all your slips with me. Tell me about your lustful feelings. Tell me about, like there's and it becomes, the partner becomes the one who, well, I'll tell you when it's okay when we have sex or not, and if I feel safe enough. And that really goes back to that out of we're not in a peer-to-peer relationship, we're in a mentor-mentee relationship. And it sounds graphic the way that I say it, but like in that position, if she for instance is the sexual authority and the partner is not, you're in an imbalanced situation. Well, typically we don't want to have sex with somebody who's less than us, like a child, for instance, right? And so the idea is we want to be equal. We want to have intimacy with somebody who is our equal and who is our partner. And so the betrayed partner, for instance, learning to not be the sexual authority, the person struggling with the addiction to not put them in that position where both can talk about their sexual desires with each other, both have the ability to proposition each other for sex. Because too often a person who's struggling with an addiction will go to anorexia in an attempt to control their sexual behaviors. And I can't tell you how many partners I've worked with who are like, man, for somebody being a sexual addict, I never get propositioned anymore. And what we have to do is navigate that road together so I love this one. We love each other. We want to be together and still have that hot sex. And it's like, yeah, like that's what we long for. Well, you've got to do that by risking with each other, by being honest with each other. And partners will often say, well, how do I know when it's okay to have sex? And my response is, I don't know. How do you know that you want to have sex? How do you know that you feel comfortable having sex? Well, but can I have sex if he or she had a slip yesterday? And I'm like, I don't know. Can you? And they're like, well, I don't feel bad. I mean, I would enjoy it. I'm like, well, then do it. But what if that's not good for them? And I'm like, I don't know. Ask them. Why don't you have sex and then have a conversation about it? Was that bad for your addiction? Is that good? Is this healthy? Right? Like we get too caught up in what's okay and what's not okay, as if there's rules to this, as opposed to actually having a conversation or trying something and figuring out, does that work for me? If you feel comfortable and you know your partner had a slip yesterday and you just want to be sexual and you feel safe enough to do so, or you're willing to risk it, try it. Right? Like, don't get into this space of like making all of these rules of when it's okay and when it's not. I've worked with a lot of partners who are like, well, anytime there's a slip, they have to move out of the bedroom. And I'm like, why? Well, because they need to know it's not okay. Okay, so you're assuming they don't already know that, and that moving them out of the bedroom is the only way you can communicate that, right? Like, what are these rules and where did they come from? Like, if you need them to move out for a week because that's what you need to get grounded and get stability, that's fine. But don't come up with arbitrary rules that don't actually meet your need. And so it's been a really enlightening thing for my partners where I say, why don't you ask your partner what they need post slip? Do they need to move out of the room? Is that helpful for them? Do you need them to? Right? Like, have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes there's too many rules as opposed to tuning into yourself and figuring out what helps and what doesn't help.
Or assumptions, rules and assumptions. It's like having him move out of the bedroom is going to make him toe the line or whatever it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow,
So,
and we're back into, I'm now the parent punishing the child for being a bad boy.
yeah.
It's like, ooh,
Well, when you're talking about the slips, I was like, that's like a principle at the school. You turn in your slips or your tardy slips or whatever it is. It's like, and anything that is not the two of us, is off. Is off for a partnership. A healthy relationship. You talked about boundaries. I heard the other day someone was talking about, and I heard it from the addict, but their partner had. It was well over 50 boundaries, and I was like, "Oh, I would never be able to keep track of them." And he wasn't either. But I was like, there's like a handful of categories for, where you're looking for safety, and it is about your safety. I've also heard, like, when you're talking about hot sex, the I hear often that partners are afraid of, if they do something more than boring, that it will no, that it will
yeah,
trigger, the sexual addiction. So can you
right,
talk a little bit about that? Like, if I do anything real exciting, it's going to make
yeah,
the dopamine go crazy or something like that.
right. And I've got to stay vanilla as a way of controlling my partner's potential out of control behavior. And
Yes.
and and I what I've seen is, and I'm as I've worked with people struggling with the compulsivity, I'll ask the partners, have a conversation about this. And it's fascinating how many times people struggling with the compulsivity have, what I will consistently hear is, us having sex is nothing like me acting out. Like, it doesn't even hit the same like spaces in my brain. Right. And now I don't have the MRI or fMRI research to back it up. But what I hear over and over is, and you look at people who get into the out of control behavior, when they're really in it, a lot of times they will reject intimacy, sexual intimacy with their spouse, because would rather act out. Like, that shows it's in many ways so different. And so what I've found is that if you're having a sexual experience with your partner, um, you aren't you aren't in that same space. And so what you really have to do is check in and say, does this work for me? Do I somehow want to stay vanilla? Right? Is that really me just trying to control the situation? Right? But I would open it up. Like, hey, is there anything I've ever done that gives you the temptation to act out sexually, for instance? And if they say yes, okay, so do we need to avoid that? Or is that just something you need to work through? Because here's the thing, I don't tell people in recovery I mean, I would never say, hey, go hang out in bars to lower your sensitivity. But at the same time, don't avoid every situation that gives you a trigger, right? Sometimes we need to work through triggers so that they are no longer triggers. And boy, one place that's a great thing to do is in our sexual relationship. And so I would say, as a couple, talk about that. Should we work through this together so that this becomes less and less of a trigger? So does this answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, well, and I think, first of all, I've heard you say, I don't even know how many times, talk about it. And I think that that's one of the missing pieces is like we get all caught up in our heads, like I'm afraid of, and it's okay to say to your partner, I'm afraid that if we do this, then like that's okay. That's
Yeah.
part of the conversation of like, I have fear around this.
Is
that true?
I would argue that's the most important part of the conversation, is that part leading to it that says, I want to share something with you, but I'm scared. I'm scared that you're going to be upset, or I want to share something with you, but I'm scared that you're going to get frustrated with me. Like, I think that piece is where the attachment opportunity really lies. Because if you're able to show up with me in my fear, even just in opening up with you, that creates safety for me.
Mhm.
So, oh my gosh, I love that you noticed that.
Yeah, but and I think it's really easy, like, and we have lots of support for betrayed partners, and we do want people to talk, but talking to them is just, that's a bunch of people who are in a similar situation. Your partner is the person you're looking to connect with the most. So having this is the real vulnerability, is to be willing to have a conversation, start with like talk about whatever it is, and it's okay to say this is going to feel awkward because we never talk about this. Like I always start with what is the worst thing I'm afraid of this, it's going to be awkward.
It is fascinating to me when as I have been working with couples, especially around sexual issues, for being such an important thing in a relationship, the number of people who don't talk about it. Right. So I will have a conversation and I'll say, hey, talk to me about how many times you propositioned your spouse or your partner for sex. And they'll say, oh, I propositioned them 3 times this week. I got rejected every time. And the partner's looking like, what? Right. And then we start breaking it down. And I realize the way that people believe that they're propositioning. Oh, well, I was brushing my teeth and kind of giving them the eyes, or it's so funny. I'm like, yeah, brushing teeth, that's foreplay already,
Yeah. And how could she not notice that?
What, I had an erection and I pushed myself into her body, and it's like, wow, you're, like,
how romantic.
Right. Or I said, hey, how tired are you? Oh, I'm really tired. Okay. Well,
that's rejection.
Well, right. Like it's interesting how little we talk about it, as opposed to, hey, I'm feeling a little sexually uh experimental, and I was just wondering, you want to play around a little, you know what I mean? It's like, that would be terrifying for so many people, just to say, hey, I'm feeling frisky. Are you open to a quickie? It's like, whatever, right? Like it sounds funny, but it's like, honestly, we need to develop vocabulary and have conversations with each other. And especially when you have relationships that have sexual trauma, whether it's sexual trauma that's caused because of a compulsivity, or sexual trauma because of, previous sexual abuse or infidelity, or whatever it might be. It's like, we need that vocabulary more than ever.
I agree. Okay, so the next one is I'm an ultra runner. I have ran several 100+ mile races. I also have paced several people in these events. Both roles were amazing, nothing like it in the world. I believe that and honor you both for doing that. And I would need a pacer to just get through 20. Okay, so how does all this work when the SA has been in recovery for 23 years and is still having relapses and slips and never comes forward and tells on himself? He is always caught, sometimes in relapse mode for years before he is caught. Well, he's not in recovery. That's the first fallacy in this, is like he's been in recovery. So he's been around the recovery world, but that's somebody that has not done enough work. I mean, like that's that's like in AA. If somebody's like, yeah, I've been going to AA for 23 years, but I've never really had any, I've been I have not drank for, a few months at a time here and there, but I've really not ever stopped, well, what are
Right.
you doing for your recovery?
Right. And I would argue that so this person's been exposed, if you will, for 23 years.
Yes.
And it's tough because there are times where one, you have not developed a relational agreement. I would actually argue that as couples, especially in this situation, but I would say in every situation, we need to have a conversation like, what are our relational agreements? What do we believe are okay or are not okay? And so, for instance, I've worked with people who, as a couple, they won't talk about it, but then I'm going to find out that that they both are like, we're okay with masturbation under these circumstances, or we're okay with, and so then you go, okay, well then you guys haven't even developed your relational agreements to figure out what you're both okay with. And so I think everybody needs to have that conversation, because if one partner is like, hey, masturbation every once in a while, no big deal. A glass of wine every once in a while, no big deal. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's figure out what works between us, depending on what our issues are. And so I think developing relational agreements on what's okay and what's not okay, because unfortunately, this individual might feel like occasionally looking at porn and masturbating to them, let's say, because you said sex addiction in this one, SA recovery, they might feel personally that that's not doing them harm. And so you guys need to talk about that, because if they feel that way, then we need to either figure out if that's within our relational agreements or if that's a violation. And if that's a violation, then hey, I'm struggling to have intimacy in our relationship because to me that doesn't work. And then I have to decide if my SA partner is violating that agreement that we both share. How intimate can I be emotionally, sexually? There's times where I've told partners, what if this never changes? How intimate can you be? Because you ultimately are saying, in some sense, though I'm not comfortable with your behavior and I wish it would change, we have a relational agreement that you can engage in this behavior and I'm not going to leave you. Right? Like it's an unspoken relational agreement that you guys potentially have had going on for 23 years. So you might just own that to some degree, you're okay with it. You're not leaving. Now, I'm not saying up and pack your bags to show him you're not okay with it, him or her, you're not okay with it. Oh, you said he. But I think we need to be a little bit honest that this is something that's been going on for 23 years. There might be some unspoken relational agreement there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's hard. I mean, because it's hard to think, because there's no blame towards a partner. I think it's just, yeah, like this is just identifying, he does the same thing over and over again, cycle of addiction, I keep doing the same thing over again. You catch him and it may be, I hate this. And, so maybe he stops
Right.
for a little bit or not. And then he does the same thing again. And so you guys are in this pattern that just keeps repeating.
And to some degree, you're saying, if this was their case, right? But you're almost saying, hey, as long as I can scold you and get mad and like tell you that how much I hate this, and then and then you can do it again, as long as I can do me getting frustrated and being mad. And essentially in this case, he's like, I can handle that. Like, if you just want to get mad and yell at me and tell me that I've been a bad boy, and then we can go back to living our lives, like, essentially within your relational agreements, in some sense, he's allowed to do this. Again, it's not your fault. This is just the cycle you guys are in, and it sucks. And so you want to have a conversation about, I'm really tired of this. I'm tired of not being in a relationship where we have honesty. I'm tired of being limited in our relationship. And you may end up just having to surrender that, hey, he's not going to change. And I guess I'm okay living this way. I hope that makes sense.
It does. But like, I believe that in relationships, we should have joy. We should have connection. So I'm always hoping that the addict is willing to get, to take the steps necessary to get the help. So, I mean, we have a treatment program for guys like him, honestly, right. We hear,
oh, no, there are times where I very much will say, okay, time to go to Seeking Integrity LA, because you continue to have this same behavior. At what point, and
everybody gets to choose. I mean, like you said, like, if this is the pattern and and it's working on some level for you, like, there's zero judgment. So please don't hear that we are not. We're just saying there is another way. And, for the people that, choose that, it can be different. But I think at the end of the day, what do you need to do for your safety? Your boundaries are for your safety. And that means safety, not just, I'm mad. It's like, I need, if he's acting out with other people, getting STD tests and making sure, whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself, if he's spending money on his addiction, what do you need to do for your finances? Like, those type of things are, are real boundaries. So, but and we've got lots of resources. You can always email me, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. And I'll, we got work groups, we got bunches of things that would, hopefully help him engage in a different way. So, okay, next question. Regarding both, talking about being in the mood, what if the woman wants to wait until she gets turned on and doesn't know when that will be, and doesn't want to be asked for sex because her whole marriage has been about pushed for sex and doesn't want to be pushed away anymore? Thank you. You're awesome. That's complicated.
It's super complicated.
Like, how do you, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the two types of sexual arousal, right? Like, or sexual desire, if you will. You have responsive arousal, which means arousal doesn't come unless there is some type of a stimuli, right? And then you have a spontaneous arousal, which basically is, I'm spontaneously aroused. I didn't even need a stimuli. And then it happens that way. Well, 30% of all women never have anything but a responsive arousal, right? And so now, I think everybody at some point in their life only has a responsive arousal. I don't think there's anybody who is always spontaneously aroused, but
somebody's probably in there going, I can tell you somebody.
Fair enough. But ultimately, right, somebody's like, he's so wrong.
Yeah.
But ultimately, so you're in a situation where if the woman wants to wait until she gets turned on, I can guarantee you there's partners that are saying, well, we're never having sex again because she's never going to get turned on. I would actually argue what we're looking at here is we would need to explore her feeling pushed or asked for sex, because that's the piece where I'm looking at it going, that's where the relational agreements are off. So for instance, like, the relational agreement, I'm not okay with you asking me for sex. And for so many years, you would ask, you would push, you would pressure, right? And so now I've been hurt by you not honoring what I needed in the relationship, whether it was spoken or unspoken. And so now as a couple, we need to explore, what are ways that you can let me know that you're sexually interested without me feeling pressure? And so we need to shift that dynamic in the relationship, because it doesn't mean, I don't think there was a gender for the partner here, but let's say the partner says, we don't want to tell the partner, you can't ever let me know if you're sexually interested, right? That, I don't think that's healthy in a relationship. However, we need to talk about what ways can we talk about your sexual interest where I don't feel pushed and pressured. Because it's the pushed and pressured, right? One of my favorite quotes around sexual intimacy is, it's not dysfunctional to not want sex that you do not like. That's Emily Nagoski. And so you are saying, I don't like the type of sex that you're propositioning me with, and that is pressured sex. And so you're saying, I won't feel turned on until you create an environment that is sexually relevant. And so you are in a position where you might be accidentally sending the message, don't talk about it, don't create a sexual environment where I'm turned on until I have spontaneous arousal. Well, that might be never, if you think about it, right? And so, well, let's start talking about what a sexually relevant environment is. It can be as simple as, hey, when you get home from work, or when I get home from work, can you ask me how my day is? Can we talk a little bit about, can you show me that you're interested in me? Hey, can you put your arm around me and cuddle with me without touching me sensually, right? Like, show me that you can respect boundaries, and that you can ask me what my boundaries are. Ask me what you're comfortable with and not comfortable with. Can you show me you're sexually interested with, and also let me know that there's no pressure, right? So now we start creating an environment where we can talk about sex. We can even express ourselves sexually without feeling like there's pressure in the relationship. So we create sexual relevance, without, and then take away that pressure that has caused so much damage previously. And so I think you're spot on. You should have every right to not have sex you don't like, and that is pressured sex. In fact, I would argue that's a huge turnoff for you. That's something that's hitting your decelerator, right? And so here's the things that decelerate. Here's the brakes. Let's talk about those, and let's talk about the things that accelerate. But the problem is, sometimes you're going to hit something that accelerates, and I'm going to go, are you just doing that to try and get sex? Right? And so we need to have a conversation around that. It might be, yeah, I was hoping for sex. I thought it'd be great, but if it's okay if you don't want it. I might be disappointed, right? But that's fine. And so one of the important things about healthy sex is that there are no unwanted consequences. And a non-unwanted consequence? Nope. An unwanted consequence might be undue pressure. It might be your spouse pouting because they didn't get what they wanted, right? A pouting spouse is now a child spouse, which, again, most of us, our sexual desire is going to turn off when our spouse is pouting because we don't want to have sex with a pouter, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
So hopefully this answers that very complicated thing. I've thrown out several concepts that I think are relevant to the question. And please add more questions in if you need any clarity.
Well, and I added in the chat, sensate, focus, touch, because often like just taking the pressure away is like, can you hold hands? Can you massage feet? Can you rub back? I mean, is there touch that would be like, take that off the table, so that you back it up and then see, but that's a connection that is vulnerable, but not as vulnerable. And it isn't the end goal of like, we're gonna have sex, it's like, but it's just connecting in a physical way.
Right. Let's take orgasm out of the sexual experience. It sounds weird, but let's make the focus pleasure. And so right now, I'll give you a massage, you can give me a massage, maybe we trade, and we're going to experience pleasure. but I'm not interested in orgasm at this time because I don't want the pressure. And so that's where it's like sex needs to be about pleasure and connection, including, hey, I'll take a massage. And if you can show me that you can give me a massage without it leading to sex, I'm going to start to feel safe. And so yes, absolutely. Can we hold hands? Can we give each other massages? That sort of thing. Great ways of changing the sexual dynamic.
So the next question, when you're too dysregulated to know or have access to what your needs are, is it realistic to try to set boundaries? I'm back in crisis mode after discovering a multi-year relapse after a multi-year period of sobriety with my SAPA partner. I don't regret not being in hypervigilant and not investigating these last few years because I've been going through my own trauma of becoming disabled after getting severe COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. My life was better for holding that personal boundary for my emotional health so I could physically recover. But now I feel completely unable to make or set any boundaries about his behavior in this crisis or of relapse discovery because I haven't been in the emotional space the last few years to really set any other than I'm not going to worry about him because I need to worry about me. And now all I can do is worry about him.
Okay, so I actually love that while he was in supposed recovery, you weren't hyper vigilant. And what was the other word you used? There was another word, but I love it because, to be honest,
And not
oh,
investigating. Yeah.
yeah, hyper vigilant and investigating. I tell people all the time, like, I'm not going to want to sit in a relationship where I have to be hyper vigilant and investigating. If you can't figure out your recovery without me being hyper vigilant and investigating, then I'm seriously going to question our relationship. I'm going to question your recovery, right? Like, and for good reason. I mean, I'm looking at this situation going, you were taking care of yourself. Well, that's what I would encourage you to do. And when you said the question originally that you right at the beginning, when you're too dysregulated to know or have access to what your needs are, is it even realistic to try and set boundaries? My answer to that is, you know exactly what your needs are, and your needs are regulation. And so your focus needs to be on getting healthy regulation. So I wouldn't think that, oh, I don't know what my needs are. You are so tuned in and aware that you're dysregulated. Your primary need is emotional, physical regulation. And so, no, I think it is realistic to set boundaries, and you're doing it by figuring out what your emotional regulation needs to be. So I think we need to be careful, and I think this is ultimately what you're asking, not to start throwing out like arbitrary boundaries just to try and get control. You're right. I don't think that's particularly healthy. Well, all the partners in my partner group say that if a relapse happens, I need to kick them out for 90 days. And it's like, okay, that's crap. Like, if that's not what you need, don't do it. But if you think, honestly, I think that would be what's best for me, then you can try it, right? I would encourage you to do it under the supervision of like a therapist doing a therapeutic separation. But ultimately, I think it's important in the middle of dysregulation to try and explore what your needs are, which are basically your boundaries. I'm trying to figure out if I answered the question.
Well, I think I agree with you, and we talk about, but you named two of them, emotional and physical. Like I think you really do know what do you need right now to focus on, and it sounds like you've made some progress physically, but it sounds like there could also be some residual. So physical and emotional, what do you need to do to take care of you?
I just thinking of an analogy, I could imagine this question being asked, and I don't think it's bad. Like, I actually think it's beautiful. But people saying to me, okay, so if I'm swimming and I'm struggling to breathe, should I focus on breathing? And I'm like, yeah, actually, if you need to doggy paddle and breathe, then doggy paddle and breathe, right? Don't keep swimming if you can't breathe. You're going to drown, right? Like, you know what your need is. And when you're dysregulated, your need is to breathe. In fact, stop swimming and just focus on floating and breathing,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
you know what your need is. Trust your gut.
Yeah. And he's going to do that. Like, this is not about you. Nothing you did or didn't do caused this. Nothing you do or don't do is going to change it. And changing all the focus to him will keep you emotionally dysregulated. So, and probably physically, challenged, by that as well. So it won't do your health, your physical health any good either. So, okay. Tell me how to slow it down. When I share my pain and fears about my SA partner's past behaviors, I tell him my worries and fears about how I think he feels or felt. I have been able to take it to an emotional level where I'm able to say, I feel like I don't matter. I know I come out as angry and he retracts and eventually he sleeps away from me. How do I slice this thinner? I know I'm improving in this, but my anger isn't helping.
You have been listening to this webinar for you to use all that language, or you've been reading some good books. So I'm going to cut to what it sounds like you need to slow it down. I'm not going to be general about how people in general can slow it down. It sounds like to me, you need to slow it down by starting with, I want to open up to you and talk to you. However, I know my anger, or I know what I say often comes out as anger. And even though you're not hearing, my softer feelings. And I don't want you to pull away just because you perceive me to be angry. So that in this situation, I would slow it down by starting anytime you're going to share your pain and fear, start by sharing your concern that it's going to be interpreted as anger, even though that's not what you're sharing. Because it's a misinterpretation, it sounds like to me, that this is an anger problem. It sounds like it's coming out as anger and he's not hearing, or you're struggling to share that it's about not feeling like you matter. So start by talking about what it looks like when it comes out as anger, what it feels like when it comes out as anger, and how it's really not your intent to be angry. You're just struggling to know how to share that. So that's, hopefully that helps you, but that's where I would start based on the information you just gave me.
And and if you have feelings about, and eventually he sleeps away from me, I would talk about that too. Are you happy that he's sleeping away from you, or does that feel like he's abandoning you rather than
Yeah.
working on being together with you in the problem to move? I'm always talking about the relationship and coming together and closing that gap and being on the path together. So if he, like, to me this would be, yeah, you're like, whatever, I'm gonna go sleep here because like it's just too much, and I'm personalizing this, but that would feel like he's not willing to be in this with me.
Yeah, that
So
would
that
feel
would
like
be
abandonment.
something. Yeah, so that would be something to look at. I'm not saying that that's you. I'm just saying that would be something to consider. So okay, the next one, and I know it's just a quote, but he's a sex addict, exclamation point. He's always sexually interested in me. And I'm like, well, sex addicts, sex is, they aren't always interested in you. They're interested in
No,
sex.
I would actually
So yeah.
argue, if he's always sexually interested in you, that's not necessarily sexual compulsivity. I would say that's fantastic. It there are ways that a sex addict could use their spouse to act out, but I would say it's more on the rare side. If he's sexually interested in you, he's sexually interested in his partner, which means there's a level of intimacy there. I'm not saying it's at the level maybe that you want it to be, but man, that's fantastic. If he's sexually interested in you, let's celebrate. In fact, I would engage in that as much as you feel comfortable and enjoy it. And hopefully he'll continue to learn how to connect better with you, and that sexual experience will be a more connected, wonderful experience between the two of you. That's fantastic.
And I'm going to be a little less enthusiastic because I hear too often from partners who are feeling like they're used within the relationship. So Matt did clarify if you feel good about it. And so I would caveat that, but I just want it to be, oh, he wants sex all the time. So therefore, there's many a sex addict, particularly early on, who are just, looking at their partner. Well, okay, I won't go have, sex with sex workers, but like I'm demanding sex with my partner all the time. So I think that we'll go back to the word balance. I think there's an
Yeah.
opportunity to
No,
have a
for sure.
discussion about this and
No, and
what does it mean?
that's what I was
So,
gonna say. Have a discussion. How often when you're sexually interested in me, do you feel like you're just using me? How often do you feel like you're actually disconnected from me? So yeah, no, have a conversation about that for sure.
what's going on in your head when you're having sex with me? That would be important. So, yeah. Okay. The last question. What do you think about medication to control urges? I have been in recovery and CSAT therapy for years and I still have strong urges.
Great question. I'm not a fan of medication specifically just to control urges. In fact, I'm in my head thinking, I don't even know of such a medication. Uh, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things out there. But let's say, for instance, somebody gets on a medication for their anxiety, and what they find is their anxiety decreases. Maybe they were using their sexual compulsivity to control or manage their anxiety. Then their sexual urges will naturally decrease because their anxiety is decreasing through medication, right? Or somebody has ADHD, and when they take medication for their ADHD and they're able to slow down and focus, their sexual desires or urges go down because they're not using their sexual compulsivity in an attempt to try and manage their ADHD. So I don't like the idea of medication specifically just to control urges. I would say if you need medication for something such as anxiety, ADHD, whatever it might be, then work with uh, your prescriber to find medications that help you in the psychological realm or physiological realm. But I don't know that I would go in and say I need something to control my urges. At that point, we need to deal with the psychological side of what's going on. Not like it's not about your sexual urges. It really isn't.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too. It's like, what are your urges telling you? Like to me, that is, you possibly don't have enough tools yet. So you say you're seeing a CSAT. What else are you doing for your recovery? Because addiction is a maladaptive coping mechanism for we don't know how to do life. So to me, like there's stuff going on in your life and you're going, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this, so I want to go act out. So there's the urge, but like what is your outer circle? What do you have going on? That you could go buy a pair of socks like Matt recommended. That would be a good choice. Go for a run. Like what can you do that would be a healthy choice when you're experiencing those? To me, that's a lot of data. If I'm dysregulated, then there's something going on and I need to attend to that in a healthy way.
And I'm
A
not
pill's not going to fix it. So,
and I'm not against you got to understand, like, using sex as a coping mechanism in our lives, there's nothing wrong with it. Somebody who overuses it, let's say, and does unhealthy things to use sex as a coping mechanism I think the idea there is that it's out of balance and it's unhealthy, right? Like, using sex as a coping mechanism, I think I use hugs as coping mechanisms. I use friendships as coping mechanisms, right? We need healthy coping
you use a
mechanisms.
run for a coping mechanism.
Oh, totally.
But all of those are just regulation.
Oh yeah,
But it's not
regulated.
my most important need. And if I go for a run, great. But if I don't, like my life isn't going to end. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're past time, and my phone is ringing off the hook. So thank you so much, Matt. Thanks everybody for all the great questions.
See you in
We'll
a couple
see you
weeks.
in a few weeks. Bye bye.
Bye.